Hello, everybody. Welcome to Midweek with me. This is Angela. I feel really close to the camera today, but here we are. If you're watching live, please say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. If you're watching on Facebook, please make sure to give StreamYard permission to let me see who you are. Otherwise, it just says Facebook user. Or if you are watching on YouTube, just make sure to please like and subscribe and do all the following things that one does, because it helps me connect with the people who vibe with me. So I really appreciate it. I am Angela Ward. Good morning, Ellie. So glad to see you. I am Angela Ward. I'm a registered nurse and I'm a soul midwife that helps people find their spark and really live with purpose and passion after traversing the wildness of their personal rebirth. I am a nurse that is also steeped in psychedelic assisted therapy. And for today, I wanted to talk about that. I realized I haven't actually spent an episode of Midweek with me talking about the potential of psychedelic assisted therapy for healing, and some of the ways that I do this work, as well as how just kind of what's up with it. So this is an open dialogue as well. Also, if you have questions when you're watching this live, please put them. Audio is cutting out. Let's make a change. Hold on. Thank you for letting me know.
Let's try that. Please let me know if the volume's working better. Sometimes, for some reason, StreamYard kind of tries to adjust the audio, I think, and cuts it out. So hopefully this is better. So hopefully what you caught what I was saying. What I was trying to say was that this work is so near and dear to my heart, and this conversation is interactive. So if you're watching live and you have questions, please type them in the chat and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Or of course you can put questions in after the live and I will do my best to answer them after the fact. So where to begin? So I imagine if you're drawn to this particular topic, you probably already know what psychedelics are. And yet, perhaps there's a few people watching that aren't certain, or you may have heard of what psychedelics are and kind of what they do. If you are my age, a child of that, grew up in the DARE era and the war on drugs era, psychedelics were really labeled as something that were to be avoided at all costs, terrifying, hallucinogens, things that made people jump off buildings or go really crazy or have aspects of mind control. And there is a long history of what happened to kind of frame that perspective, including Nixon and making a choice around Schedule I drugs. That was when the scheduling came out in the 70s to suppress the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, and there's plenty of evidence supporting that. But what I want to talk about is that psychedelics are typically, I would describe them as medicines, either plants, fungus, or synthetic molecules, or spirits, some people might say, that have been allies for human beings for as long as we can trace. There is evidence reaching far back into the deep mists of time of our relationship with psychedelic substances. I am including in this psychedelic mushrooms. Ayahuasca has a traditional use that's quite old. Ibogaine has a traditional use that's quite old. There's evidence of a number of different psychoactive substances, perhaps the medicine soma used in the Eleusinian mysteries was perhaps an ergot fungus or mushrooms. We're not certain what it could be, but this has been a traditional use within society and community to help people perhaps move through rites of initiation, for celebration, for healing, for coming of age. So it's apparent that these have been allies for our relationship to ourselves, to one another, and the planet for a very, very long time. If you want to nerd out about the historic roots, there's plenty of books out there, and I'm happy to point you in the direction of some really good information if you'd like to know more. But it's a rabbit hole one can definitely dive down for a really long time. And it's been extremely unfortunate. There was very robust study happening prior to Nixon's scheduling of psychedelic substances. In 1938, I believe it was, Albert Hofmann, a Swiss chemist, had his first psychedelic experience with lysergic acid. So it was a derivative of an ergot fungus. And also, please understand, I'm just pulling this out of my butt right now. This is information that I have, and it could be slightly wrong. So forgive me if it's slightly wrong, but I think that I have a kind of an idea about some of this. But Albert Hofmann made a choice. Apparently, he said it came into him his dreams, that LSD 25, that he was kind of called back to it. Originally, LSD was being used as I believe they were trying to create it as either a medicine to use postpartum to inhibit postpartum bleeding, or for to enhance labor, and just found it wasn't that useful. But he was called to it and took some intentionally. There is the story of Albert Hoffman's bicycle ride through Basel, Switzerland in 1938, where he was the first person to trip very hard on LSD. He did 200 micrograms, I believe, which is, he thought would be a subperceptible dose, but actually we now know that is a pretty hefty dose of LSD. And this lovely man lived into his hundreds. He took acid on a regular basis, like intentionally. I think he took it yearly, and found it to be quite a profound orientation for him throughout his life. There's so many stories here. There's also some painful stories of cultural appropriation, with R. Gordon Wasson meeting Maria Sabina Mazatec Konandera, who introduced him to psilocybin mushrooms, which then kind of flooded into the West. That's a whole tale. There's also the story of Aldous Huxley and Humphrey Osmond, Humphrey Osmond, I think, and their dialogues around the experiences with mescaline and what mescaline produced for them. Oswald is credited with coming up with the idea of psychedelic, the name psychedelic. To fathom hell or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic, is what he wrote. And the name stuck. So it's this mind manifesting medicine. It's kind of what that means. There's also more common language called entheogens, which means to manifest the divine within. And I think that's a really beautiful way to consider these tools, these teachers, as something that can help us really reconnect to that spark of ourselves that can get so muddied with our disconnection, truly. So we could talk a lot about research and all of that. I think I want to say quickly that there is a number of studies happening worldwide that are showing how psychedelics, entheogens, as well as empathogens, MDMA, for example, are contributing to helping people heal from complex PTSD, or from PTSD, from all kinds of different things, addiction, depression. You can just do a little Google search, and no doubt you will find a number of studies in this area. But I'm personally a little less interested in the studies. I think there's people doing incredible work in that arena, and that is not my scope of genius. So I'd prefer to chat with you about how I see psychedelic medicines being used. Right now, as many of you know, Oregon has in fact decriminalized a lot of all drugs, and including psychedelics. And there are unfolding at the same time, they also are creating an opportunity for state funded or supported uh, psilocybin work for people there, which is really exciting that there's going to be a place where people can go and work within a space to have a safe and legal psilocybin experience. Colorado also decriminalized. California's working on it. I'm in Washington State, and we're working on decriminalizing because while I appreciate the importance of research, absolutely, I also recognize that we're in a bind right now. There's a lot of trauma and stress and distress that desperately needs healing at this time. So politically, we can either work on legalization or decriminalization. I'm in support of all of it. I love it, and I hope that we head that way. But for me, this is how I'm able to work with this now. So just a brief background about me. I'm a labor and delivery nurse by training. I'm a birth worker. I love being with people at portals of transformation and healing. I believe birth is profoundly psychedelic or entheogenic. It's and empathogenic. It opens the heart, it opens the body, it connects us to the present moment, it connects us to this wildness beyond just our mind. And I feel that psychedelic medicine, as birth, as death, all of these things, all of these different tools are opportunities for us to see ourselves in new ways and to heal old patterns in a very rapid way and become more ourselves through these processes. I was so amazed by the evidence coming out a while ago that I did my first training at the California Institute of Integral Studies in psychedelic assisted therapy and research program. It was the second year cohort in 2017, and it was incredible. I loved it. I learned so much there and met just some true heart family there. And of course, in Washington, there's not a lot of research studies or things like that happening here. So my mentor at the time suggested that I look into working with ketamine. I was very much like, ketamine is not psilocybin, and ketamine's not these cool psychedelics. But I was quite wrong about that. I didn't realize how wrong I was until I went to my first experiential training. I've done 2 extensive trainings in ketamine assisted therapy and had very personal, profound healing through these experiences, which I'm happy to talk about another time, or if you just want to know about it. But I found ketamine to be really impactful, and a definite psychedelic in my mind in its own right, and in my personal experience. After some of these trainings, I was privileged to work at a startup. I helped open a ketamine assisted therapy clinic where I sat with a number of people in ketamine assisted individual or group sessions. I was in over 300 sessions in that particular place. And now, working in private practice, I'm also privileged to be working collaboratively with a clinic where I can bring my own clients in to do ketamine assisted therapy with me, ketamine assisted therapy and coaching using more of a psychedelic approach. So what does that mean? What is the more psychedelic approach? I've said this before, and I'll reiterate it here, that I am more interested in a psychedelic model of medicine than a medical model of psychedelics. And I'm very concerned that the psychedelic movement is going into this really medicalized model, which, as anybody can tell by looking around, that our Western medical model is extremely broken and out of touch right now. And I'm concerned that if we fold this really profound work into Western medicine, it's going to just, it'll be challenging. Much like birth, some people need to have their babies in the hospital. Some people want to have their babies at home. Some people want to be in a birth center. Some people want to be unassisted. Some people want the whole thing. So all the way from unmedicated births to surgical births. And I feel like psychedelic assisted therapy is going to be similar. Some people will do best in a more informal or friend cohort of experiencing these medicines, while some people will require more intensive formalities through their experiences, including more structured traditional ceremonies, perhaps, or even moving into a more medical supervision type of model, depending on what their own desires are truly, and maybe even health concerns. So for me, I feel like I try to work this edge. I come from a nursing perspective, which is really oriented towards awakening your inner healing wisdom, which is the idea of psychedelic assisted therapy anyway, right? That's what we're trying to do, is to awaken this part of you. And when we work with ketamine, we use it. I've heard people describe ketamine as WD-40. So it helps people kind of get unstuck. And I mean, I'll do a whole talk on ketamine sometime if you'd like to know more about it. But I find it really impactful for starting people on their healing journey, because it seems to give, like most classical psychedelics do, a different sense of self. It can kind of soften our framework of who we believe ourselves to be, including those ways that we react to things, including those ways that we are very linear in our thinking, or maybe running a pattern. Maybe you're running a pattern constantly of anxiety, or you're running a pattern constantly of depression, or you're running a pattern constantly of self-hatred or fear. And when we work in these ways with these medicines, we can soften that and examine potential ways of being that might really be different and more in alignment with your heart and who you want to be. So, yeah. When I'm talking about psychedelics, I'm definitely including ketamine in the list of things like psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT, LSD, mescaline. When I'm talking about empathogens, I'm talking about MDMA specifically. There are some other analogs out there that are a little obscure, so you might not know about them. And also maybe I want to protect them a little bit for those that work with those medicines. But yeah, and I'd like to just allow space for questions. If you'd like to hear about some other information, please post some questions in there. In the meantime, I'd like to share that in addition to working with clients with ketamine-assisted therapy, I also do psychedelic preparation and integration. Now, to me, psychedelics are wonderful tools for transformation, and yet they are a peak experience. Peak experiences have the potential to be really transformative if we prepare for them and then actually put into practice what we've been illuminated with in that peak experience. So I have seen plenty of people that have used psychedelics for recreationally. And please understand, when I say recreationally, that's not a judgment. It's a recreation, and it can be an opportunity for people to really have a new way of experiencing. Like, let's say they go to a festival and they have a beautiful time experiencing music or getting in their body and dancing. Like, I'm all for that if they're safe and all that. And maybe they have this insight and they're like, I'm going to be different from here on out, but then they don't know how to change things when they get back home. The peak experience is not actually the thing about this psychedelic work that actually makes change happen. What makes change happen is preparing and then truly integrating and embodying the lessons and understandings that you get from these experiences. So I do, in addition, personally offer a program called Travel Insurance, where I help people prepare for and integrate their own experiences. I don't ask you if it's legal or not. I don't care. I'm, as a nurse, my intention is to walk with you and support you through what you're doing and to meet you where you're at. So it's in the spirit of harm reduction, much like nurses help people with condoms and help people with needle exchanges. It's like we want you to be healthy and safe. So I support people in that way. What I think is so important to take away from this information is this work has the potential to be transformationally healing for people. It's the first real change we're seeing in mental health care in ages. We haven't had new effective medication come out for a really long time. We're seeing that ketamine assisted therapy and other psychedelic assisted therapies are showing lasting change for people in how they are doing. And friends, the time is now. Our planet cannot handle us being so wrapped up in our own trauma. We cannot continue to just traumatize others, spread trauma around, um, receive trauma from other people. We've got to get right and get healed so we can do our work from a place of healing and wholeness. So that was a loose talk of all the things I have to say. I could riff on this much, much longer if you'd like. Let me know. I'll talk about it another time. But I wonder if there's any questions. Please feel free to just drop those in if you'd like, and I'd be happy to answer them for you. What are some other things I want to tell you about? Oh, if you are watching this and you know that you're planning on doing some work with these medicines, legally or otherwise. So let's say you're working with ketamine in another clinic or you're doing this in a different way. I have a course called Mindful Journey. It's a psychedelic home use primer and it works really well. It's designed for people who are in a really good place to do this work on their own. It discusses some the preparation and integration components as well as safety considerations, and there's a link to that in the chat part or whatever in the description. I would absolutely suggest that if you are interested in journeying and like really making the most from it, as well as professionals or providers that might be having more and more clients crossing your path that are interested in this work, and it might give you some information about how to support them without putting yourself in a risky situation. Now, I just want to also be clear that I am personally not recommending this work for anybody. This is not something appropriate for every single person out there, and part of the work that I do is to get clear if this is a safe thing for you to use, or if it's what some considerations might be for the right time and setting. There's plenty of other healthcare providers out there too that I think could really talk you through this in a fair way to make sure that you are approaching it from a place of conscientiousness and safety. What else can I tell you? I'm going to say my next thing that is kind of a personal, what do I want to call it? A personal issue. Hey, can we stop calling it altered states? Let's not call psychedelic experiences altered states. The only reason I like the word altered is because it does imply an altar that might be sacred. But for the most part, altered in our society means that something is not in its normal way of being, which is true a bit in these states. But also, we use altered when we talk about neutering animals, which to me implies that an altered state is less than whole. It's less complete. It's not part of our human experience. And I very much believe that these experiences are part of our birthright. These molecules wouldn't work on our brain if we had not co-evolved with them in some way, much like we have the endocannabinoid system, which we've discovered that's what cannabis locks into. We have these systems that allow these amazing molecules to change the way that we see, perceive, and think in the world, which is amazing and didn't happen by chance. I don't believe it's here because they are tools for supportive healing and connection. So words I like instead, I like expanded states. I like non-ordinary states. I like extraordinary states. I like alternative states. Yeah, those are a couple that I really like for this language. So yeah, that's what I have to share for now. I am just learning so much. I'm currently in the Synthesis Institute Psychedelic Practitioners Training, which is just so good. It's so rich. It's a year-long program based out of Amsterdam where they work with psilocybin truffles, and we've spent the first portion of this training getting really grounded in what makes us effective psychedelic practitioners as far as contemplative practices, self-care practices, different approaches to how we might work and be in the world. And now we're in the process in this program of diving into the meat of the material. So we've embarked on our path, which includes 4 areas. There's a clinical track, a wisdom track, which is honoring kind of the indigenous practices and our elders, the personal track of how these might work for me personally, and then our professional track, like how, and the clinical track is more research and science based of understanding how these molecules work and what some of the studies include. But the professional track is also how to develop this within our different professions. And so it's quite so juicy, so juicy. There's so much good material there. If anyone's interested in learning more about either the programs I've been in or the programs I offer, I'd love to talk with you sometime. I'm happy to nerd out about psychedelics all day, every day, because I think they can really, really make lasting change happen for people. So that's what I got to share with you today, my loves. Thank you so much for tuning in with me, and I'll be here next week. Please know that I create these for you. So if there's something you're interested in learning more about, please message me. Let me know. I'm happy to talk about things that you like. All right. Have a beautiful day. Bye.